Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. Our speakers this evening are Shane Joyce, engineer and historian from Clifden, and Myles Gibbons, archaeologist, also from Clifden. And we're both descendants from people involved in the War of Independence. Shane, a direct descendant of Pádraig O'Malley, grandson, and my grandfather, Mark Keeley from Davos, was a volunteer in the Cashel, Carney area. And my mother actually learned to cycle on Countess Markievicz bicycle. But so our talks tonight are in two parts, and they're really a follow-up to a wonderful series of talks organised by Marie Mangan and Galway Bio that was held a few weeks ago here in Clifden. And they dealt with a series of really brilliant Verena Rowe, local historians and archaeologists, Kathleen Villiers-Tuttle, neighbour of ours down the street, and Irene Whelan, an exile from Ireland, long years in America, but brilliant historian in her own right, professor of history. So, and a number of other lecturers, including an old lecturer of mine, Gary Tutuhi, taught me at university. But our talk is really much, it's following on from their talks, looking at the battle for Clifden, the attack on it, and the subsequent action of the flying column as they made their way through the mountains of Joyce country, or to the mountains, their head base in Winterone, out across, back and over the Killary. And then in the middle, and then sort of as a lead into that whole story, just a little bit on the background to one of the most extraordinary stories that one of our researchers, Myles Gibbons, who is our military historian, come nautical historian, has unearthed. So it's really we're journeying in the footsteps of these brave men and women who fought for Irish independence, and were really marvellous people and really haven't got the recognition that they deserved. And as Eamon O'Malley, as he talked in his wonderful book, Tomás O'Malley, rather, Eamon's brother, Tomás described that the ordinary people of the Connemara Mountains, their unstinting support for these columns in difficult times, with a lot of food, with great danger to themselves. So he's, in his wonderful book on Thumra Row, he outlines, you know, just the support of the ordinary people, the hill farmers and boatmen of Connemara who assisted in dangerous times the column as they fought for Irish freedom. So we're going to start off, Shane's going to start off, and it's really a conversation we're having about these events. Sometimes there's conflicting accounts of them. Much of our account is based on Tomás O'Malley's fabulous account, but also the accounts of various men who left accounts in, and recorded them years later after time traveling through these wild mountains. So in terms of the Irish fight for independence, some of the toughest, hardest ground in that whole War of Independence was in the mountains of Mayo and in the mountains of Connemara. So this is difficult terrain, and that's the terrain we're going to introduce you to, the real life world of hiking and tramping and hiding and attacking and fleeing. So it's a really, really interesting story, and one really that myself and Shane have been working on for a while and meeting people. And the lovely thing about it is these stories haven't, many of them and places have been encountered by historians or archaeologists before. And in large part, of course, due to the subsequent bitterness of the Civil War. So our account is pre-Civil War account, and the excitement and the energy and that went into this really amazing period in our history when the small nation taking on the mightiest empire the world had yet seen. So we're going to head on, and Shane's going to take over for a while, and we'll be tick-tacking back and over as we go through this. So, and later on, you may get a chance to comment in on some of our observations. So these are really observations based on field work and historical research and field archaeology. So, Gormil Mahagit. So away we go.
Good evening to you all. Shane Joyce is my name. I'm a civil engineer living and working in Clifden. This project that Michael and I have been working on has been very interesting and illuminating in lots of ways, because we learned an awful lot about the trials and tribulations of the flying column and difficulties, great difficulties that they had doing what they had to do, and sometimes not getting a lot of thanks for it. So anyway, this is just a little town of Clifden, where most of our talk is centered on. burning of Clifden. We'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. The flying column, the Connemara column and the Leanan column amalgamated seemingly quite suddenly. It would appear, and their first objective was to attack a black and tan patrol that was regularly coming out from Galway to Clifden at that time. Our slide here shows the overall area of interest. The Leanan column, of course, were a major part of this. P.T. MacDonald was the main man, and Gerald Barclay in Clifden. So there were two different ends of Connemara, but they amalgamated. Other places that are on this, Muncherowan is where Pádraig O'Malley's house was, and there was a big battle there. That was one of the big battles. Man Barracks is shown there. There was no battle there, but a lot of men were interned in there and brutally beaten in some cases. Screeb, there was a battle with the RIC down in Screeb. 5 RIC men were out giving out pensions, and there was a considerable battle there. Derry Lee, Clifden and Gowland come very much into our sphere of influence here. Letterfrack is there for information, and Alec na Vig is a very interesting place where they had a hideout, which was the centre of their operations while this was going on. This is just another blow up of this. You can see that the hideout is marked there up in what is now forestry.
Up on the right hand side, Shane, isn't it there?
Yes, it says where it says hideout.
All right, okay, I see it there now.
Yeah. This is the 1-inch map of the area. These maps were used by it would appear by the flying columns all over the country, because they were the best map to illustrate a larger area of interest, like at the scale of miles. There's no point looking at the 6-inch map as no use to you. So these maps are in constant use. On the top right hand corner here, we show where the actual the hideout was, which was an old herd's house, and they actually put a new roof on it and made it as comfortable as they could. But it was a very small house with about 20 men sleeping in it. This is the townland. It's 963 acres, a substantial townland. Very bad ground. The IRA had terrible problems traversing it. It was boggy, incredibly boggy, deep bog, and men used to get coming back home in the evening would get sometimes it gets stuck in the bog up to their armpits. So it was a very difficult, and you imagine they had no showers obviously or anything like that when they got back. Now this is the you'll see the little lake at the bottom, Loch On, and then there's this little square-shaped, rectangular-shaped area, which was where the house was, and the little rectangle within that is the actual house. It wasn't too hard. Michael and I, we spent a bit of time out there. We located the house, and we'll just show it to you here. This is the current situation. The house actually isn't marked in this, but there's two lakes to the right of the picture, and it's just up to the north of that is where the house was.
Yeah, the area has been, as you can see, completely blanketed in forests, and hopefully we might later have some discussions with the forestry to clear the area around it, because it is an important building, and it was used as a herd's house, so that means it's remote from any settlement, and of course that's why they would have picked it. You know, it's really out of the way spot, so a secretive place. So you need detailed local knowledge to get in and out of it. But it's an extraordinary place.
I should have said, we're very close to Letterfrack here, and in fact, if you were going to the shop, which obviously they didn't, you'd head up north into in between the Diamond. Everybody knows Diamond Hill and Knockbrack in between there, and you'd be very close to the Leenan Road at that point. There's no record of them going there. It would seem most of the provisions came from safe houses nearby. This is a blow up again, just to show you basically the scale of the. It's 100. The grid is 100 square meters, so it'll give you some idea of the size of the enclosure and the house, which is in green. Now, this is probably the first view Michael and I have had of the site, which it's probably you wouldn't recognize the house there, but there is actually a house in the middle of that. And this is up nearby. You can see that the walls and the amount of it's very grassy, and Terry O'Toole's wife Marie recalls being brought up there by her father many years ago, and she described it as being really grassy when we talked to her first about it, and it is absolutely exactly like that.
Because it's on a little knoll overlooking the stream, so it's on a little bit of dry ground surrounded by deep bog, so the perfect type of broch or herd sod for your it would have been used to access the mountains all around it. But we were delighted to find it because we were initially very quite worried that the forestry had ploughed over it, but luckily they hadn't. There's a few trees overhanging it, but it's it's a significant building with its historical context, and it's owned by the state because it's in the forestry. So out from here, we'd hope to get this building protected.
Now, just a little bit of background from the census, which is always interesting. John Nee was the herd, and he was actually in Whelan in 1901, and he had a full family there, as you see. His wife, obviously, which frequently happens, he's a two-year-old son and no wife. So I think a lot of these ladies died in childbirth, unfortunately. So he had a big family. In 1911, then there was only 4 of them in the house, and he's down there actually as a farmer. But this is in Alioch na Vig. And what is important to Michael and myself was the fact that this is the only habitated house in the whole 960 acres of the townland. So that is the house, which is obviously important for our purposes. Now, this is one of the most important guys in P.T. MacDonald. He was a coach builder from Mayo, actually, and I think he moved to Lena, and he had a yard near the Leenan Hotel, it would appear. P.T. MacDonald was incredibly highly regarded throughout the IRA and particularly in Clifden. And he's central to everything that went on himself, and as I think I said before, Gerard Bartley. And this is P.T. is here again. If anybody knows where this photograph was taken, I'd love to find out. Michael and I don't know. P.T. is there to the left, standing to the very left, on the very left of this photograph.
Is Pádraig Ó Máille in that photograph?
He's not. No,
he's not in this one. Yeah,
Pádraig Ó Máille seems to kind of appear and disappear. He was elected in the 1918 election for Connemara in a landslide, and he was coming and going. It's hard to keep up with him, to be honest with you. And he's mad brothers as well. Now, this is the Derry Lee Lake. You probably all know the road has been changed considerably in the last about 7 years ago. It's a windy piece of road. You can see the lake there, and the red square is where the attack was supposed to take. So the land to the right of to the north of the road is generally quite high, but there's it's not so high, and I think one of the reasons for choosing that is because a lot the armament that the IRA had was pretty poor, and a lot of it was just shotguns, and this was all true all throughout the War of Independence. It took time. Raids on RAC barracks were really important for gaining arms, and of course, when they get into fights with Crown forces, they'd often collect arms. Lee Enfield rifles were one of the greatest rifles ever designed, it would appear. Were much sought after, and the ammunition, and also the Michael mentioned Lewis machine guns. They were also sought after, and the IRA did capture a lot of these, which had a huge effect on their operations. Now this is the road as it is now. That slope is roughly where it happened, but the slope is actually has been cut back 7 years ago by the Galway County Council. So that where they actually attacked from would probably even be lower than what we're looking at there. Now we're just going to talk a little bit about cross-sea tenders. They were expecting these cross-sea tenders to come out, and the cross-sea tender was an amazing little car that was used largely by the RAF and the Royal Flying Corps in World War I as tenders for bringing fuel out to refill fighter planes. You see here, this one here is towing it's actually a Sopwith fighter. And this is one in action in Dublin. You can see it's kind of hard to you're seeing three different crowds here. You're in the cross. You see the man under the Lawler sign is one of the auxiliaries, and most of the guys on the tender are black and tans, and you'll see the man driving the vehicle with the cap on him. He is probably an RAC man, and all the men to the rear are all RAC men. So you're seeing the full spectrum of Crown forces, and of course the RAC were an Irish force, of course. And here's definitely auxiliary. The black and tans came famously, and they were getting 10 shillings a week, which was an extraordinary amount of money at the time. There was lots of problems with the black and tans, and then Winston Churchill had a lot to do with sending the auxiliaries who were ex-servicemen officers, and they were deemed to be a more superior foe in every way, and certainly the IRA found them to be difficult to get past. And here in Galway, there was different companies. So in Galway, it was D Company were in Galway, and their barracks was, you see actually there's two cross-sea tenders in this photograph as well. Their barracks was at Lennaboy House, which is right beside the Taylor's Hill boarding school, or as it was. On Taylor's Hill, and that's where they were based. Now they were tough fellas, and they were pretty cruel as well. They were responsible for a lot of attacks on people. The Loughnane brothers were brutally attacked and disfigured by these guys, and Ellen Quinn, who was she was feeding her nursing her baby at the side of the road, and so an auxiliary patrol went past, just shot her dead for no reason whatsoever. Now we're getting out into the area of Clifden. This is Clifden Station, railway station. There you can see to the left, you can see St. Joseph's Industrial School and the workhouse, which of course was still functional at that time.
The workhouse now, for those who know Clifden, was where the Garda station is now on the approach into the town. So it was a very big, prominent building, about a mile from the center, or half a mile from the center of town. So it's just to sort of set you. So on the railway line to the south of it, and the main road just to the north of the workhouse, and then an older road, a net or a trail on the underneath Crookahegla, which is where Tullavoheen is marked on top of the hill there. So the entrance to the town is quite constricted, as you'll see in a few minutes.
Yeah, as Michael says, you can see all the red rectangles. They're habited houses. You can on the Ordnance Survey, if a house is hatched, it had a roof on it when it was surveyed. So it tells you these were functional houses, and there's quite a lot of them, which is there's about 17 of them here in this picture, and basically this would be an ideal way to get into to Clifden if you're coming over. They're coming over from the top right hand corner of the screen. They're generally heading towards the industrial school in that direction. But with all these people there, it's a very flat area, and it would have been lovely to go down there, but it's highly unlikely that they would have taken a risk going through so many houses that people, there were lots of people who certainly weren't pro IRA, so they would have actually moved along up above this screen. Actually, up you can see Nambraca, which is the town where the town water supply comes from now, somewhere north of that even. And here's just to give you some idea. There's 12 different houses there shown for Tullavoheen, and you'll see at the bottom you'll see some C and K. There were people quite a substantial amount of people actually were in the workhouse in 1911. Now this is the kind of terrain that they would have crossed over north of Tullavoheen, and it's quite chaotic and difficult and boggy. And they were coming in at about 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and they had a guide, and the guide got lost, and they were going around in circles, and they ended up where they started from. And in the bureau account, they're saying he had a very uncomfortable time. So there were also, you see the Lean End men weren't that familiar with Clifden, so the guides who would have been furnished by Gerald Bartley were very important to liaising with the two different groups.
And that's a very important point, Shane, because among the column you've men from Ballyconneely, Roundstone area, you have more from Glannagimla, others from Leenane, you have more from Rossmuck area. So it's an amalgamation of different groups from different parts of Connemara. And most people would not have known areas outside their immediate area. They might have gone to fairs or gone to Momain to a pattern day, or to Tubbercawley in the odd time, or to the big fairs in Clifden and Letterfrack. So unless you had the very specific local knowledge, it was foreign country to you, and they gradually got to, in their few months tracking through here, they got familiar with it. But in the initial attack, of course, this was completely a foreign country. And as you can see, in foggy conditions, I got lost, I remember, on Weir one time leading a group, and after 3 hours, someone said, "Oh, that's where I left my hat." We were right back at the start in an area that I knew well. So it's very plausible to see them, even with a local guide at night, tracking through here and not being able to make the way through these bogs, and just saying, because you have no orientation, of course, and there's no electric lights. People forget there's no electricity in the rural houses. So at night time it's very dark, and it's soft, and it's foggy, and you're not sure, and you're scared. Anyway, so this is the country they're traipsing through, and this is the lower land, but it's still complicated ground.
Yeah, and there's no line of sight.
Yeah.
You're stuck here. Yeah, but that's a big problem. There's just another, and you can see, you can imagine.
This is looking down into Clifden now.
No, actually, no. I think this is looking. That's. We're looking towards Shane.
All right, all right, okay. Well, anyway, it's just close to Clifden.
That's the road. That's the road. Is we can see it here.
Westford Road.
The Westford Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, no.
That's all right. And here's just a view. This is you can see in the red square, you can see the church here. That was really where they're aiming for. The houses that I was talking about are down in the valley there. We can't. The rooms are out there. Obviously, there's no houses in this direct area, but the ruins are still there. And you could imagine, you could see, it would be lovely just to walk through the middle of the photograph here from left to right, because it's nice and even. And it's dry underfoot, but they couldn't do that. And this is a house which is probably out of view there. It was a Joyce house. It was a safe house, and known to be a safe house. And these people are known to have given the IRA a lot of information at the time, but they didn't have any direct part in the Clifden ambush. But their house, a few days later, their house was known as most of these houses were. They were due to informers. It was known to be an IRA house, and this house was burnt with the town on St. Patrick's Day. Now we're just looking down here. It's just it's a convenient photograph. The red square is the house we were just talking about. You can see how close it is to the town. The IRA would have their last to get into their staging area. They would have come along from right to left there along the blue line towards past the church and towards the courthouse. And the blue line there basically shows a possible typical access that they would have, the final access into Clifden, and which terminates near the courthouse. The Joyce house is in red there. This is Shanahever Lodge. They had to abandon because of the problem with the guide and the RAC had gone back to barracks. They had to abandon their first target, and they stayed in another safe house, Joyce house near Shanahever. And Tom Joyce, until recently, has been in the family for generations, and Tom was able to confirm to me that this is actually where they did stay. So they had to cross that terrain that we talked about to get to this house, and they stayed there till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then they headed off again. They didn't stay. The house was very small, and they couldn't all stay there. Perhaps they felt they were a bit too close to Clifden, and they headed for Gowlon. Actually, is where they went to next. Now. So this is kind of an overview map. You can see the Tualia and Naveg. That's where they came. About six miles across the terrible bog, and they made their way up north of the house in Tullaboy and down, as I said, we're speculating to the near the courthouse where some of the men were staged. Later on, they went north, as I said, to Shanahever, that's the pink line, and then they came across the country again, all the way to where the green arrow was in Gowlon, which is quite a long distance at 2:30 in the morning. So these men must have been incredibly tired, and they stayed in Gowlon in all the following morning and afternoon at those safe houses. And here they are. You got the Walsh house and the Gavin house, which were, we believe, well, certainly the Gavin house is known to be one, and local knowledge tells us that the Walsh House was also used. So they stayed here, as I said, till late in the afternoon, and they made their way back into the courthouse from here. This is actually, if you're ever out there, this is where the end of the line. I reckon they would have come along the railway line for part of, from Waterloo Bridge, and if they did, they would have come under this lovely Skew Bridge, which is, if you're out in Gowland, you should have a look at it. It's an extraordinary brickwork phenomenon to actually build one of these. I think the first one was in Ireland, was built in County Kildare, I think. So a very, very complex bridge. There was another one near Mam Cross, the same design, but which is gone now. And this is the Walsh House, which was used. Michael, you might mention the topography there, or what's in the background.
Yeah, right. So you're looking at the Walsh House, and the Gowan's very interesting. It's a little bit of fertile ground on a height, commanding a view down across Ramstone Bog, backing on to a low ridge of hills, and then beyond that again you have the Oundlin River. But in the background here you've got Binbrian, and Binbrian actually is the mountain at the base of which An the Víoch is. That was their main camp. So it's a really nice, so the house is now gone, but it's very traditional, late 19th century house, and would have had a thatched roof, of course, until this fancy new roof was put on it. But these are the type of houses in general that people were staying in. And one of the really nice things about the project is that, is getting in the conversation. Marie Welsh popped up with, oh, they stayed in our old house, and that this is really lovely. That these are the history is made with the minute details of how you picture a story together, and every story brings another story. So we're very grateful to Marie Welsh and her family, and Terry, of course, her long-suffering husband, for showing us this area. And we went on then to have a lovely meeting with the Gavins and Peter Gavin, as you'll see now in the next couple of slides. So we'll move on from this one, and you'll see Marie was able to bring out, if you want evidence, archaeologists like evidence, and there's no better evidence than an IRA medal, which Marie was able to produce. And we actually have located one of these from our own family down in Carna recently, with Pádraig O'Keela was able to show a medal from his family, from the Carna Cashel column that was operational, a group that was operational down there. But look at this for a lovely relic, long hidden, long forgotten, and just to bring it out. A beautiful design as well. So these are the IRA campaign medals. And
yeah, they were very elegant, actually. And
these would have been treasured possessions, of course, in the houses, but not spoken about, of course, because of the sensitivities over the Civil War subsequently.
And this is the Gavin house. So Peter to the left of the group there. So that is the house that Tom Joyce identified for me, which solved a problem. Because they say a certain amount of distance from Clifden, but the distance didn't make sense with the group of houses. It would have put them closer to where PK Joyce's house is now, which didn't quite seem right. So it's great to get this piece of information from Tom, and then to meet the Walshes and Peter Gavin on site. And here's just a nice photograph taken out all these good-looking men and Marie at the Gavin house. So that was a great moment to actually be out there talking to these people. It was wonderful. And another, just a little side thing about this: the Gowland houses there are both within the left-hand red square. The right-hand red square is where we started, where the crusty tenders were supposed to come, and the difference between these two locations is less than a mile. And it seems to me, this is speculation, I hasten to add, but that they probably made contact with the Gavins and the Walshes while the 4 or 5 days that they were waiting for the black and tans to arrive, and they never did. So they were there for that period of time, and I suspect that they had got in touch. And when they were looking for a safe house to stay the night, it was probably the safest place they could think of, because it was a decent distance from town as well. Now, we're getting into Clifden here now. A really interesting photograph. It's 1118 in the Lawrence collection. All these photographs are taken by, I can't think of his name now, the one man, and over a few 2 or 3 decades. The interesting thing about this is that there's no Clifden church. What you're looking at there is the nuns' place. On the left, you got the guard, the RIC barracks, I should say, and you can see that the windows are barricaded. The significant thing here is for our purposes is the fact that there's a high wall near the barracks, which our men would have been hiding behind. That's no longer there.
What's amazing is how little vegetation, how open. This is 40 years probably earlier than the attack, but how open the road is coming in from Clifden. No vegetation,
no railway either, of course.
No railway, yeah. So it's a really no station house hotel. So it's, you can see the town came right into the almost into the edge. You know, yes. There was no suburbs or anything. Very much the new town out in the wilds of Connemara. It was a great shot, and the 2 policemen probably on the corner here.
Yes, and there's a strange. I think it might have been some kind of a policeman's whistle there. There's this kind of, I'm not sure what it is. Also, of course, there's no railway, which would be very much evident in this picture if it had been built. You can see towards the extreme right, you can see the workhouse part of it.
No problem with traffic that day, anyway.
No, not that day. Apart from the dog was causing a bit of a hazard, I'd say. There it is now, so we just click back and over on that now. But so you can see it's not the angle isn't exactly the same, but you can see. I believe just go by that was an engine house. It's no longer used as that for the fire brigade. It probably built in the late 50s or early 60s, and I'm not quite sure. And this is the view looking. Not exactly what the IRA men would be looking at, but basically there were 6 people in the firing party that shot the RIC men, and then there were 15 then over near the courthouse, and this is what they would be looking at. So these 4 bays of windows, they would have been shooting at those. Keeping in an attempt to keep because there were black and tans augmenting the RIC men in Clifden, and they wanted to improve the chances of their own the firing party, the IRA firing party. They were trying to keep the rest of the RIC men in. And they had very little ammunition, so they were shooting, and then the RIC were shooting back out presumably through the windows, and the IRA men were just trying to keep them going, just to avert their attention from what the real prize was. So that was the plan, and that's what they carried out. This is just an area view. It shows you, giving an idea of the field of fire. There's and Morley's vegetable and flower shop is there now. The rectangle I showed there is the field of fire that was available to the IRA men from the courthouse. Now, a lot of the killing of the 2 RIC men happened actually on Main Street. I was slightly out of view actually in these photographs, but they're very evocative of Clifden.
So what you have in it is you have the square with E.J. King's Corner in the main square, still there, a prominent building. You have the Railway Hotel, which is Files Hotel now. You have the old schoolhouse up on the hill, and you have the lane going up here to the Church of Ireland, which is here. So this was the heart of the town, if you like, the market square, where the busy market. This is a slightly earlier photograph, but it shows you the setting for the ambush. So tall buildings, wide streets, fairly open ground. So a tricky enough spot to carry out an ambush. But this is where the ambush actually took place.
Okay, this is a diagrammatic view to scale. Michael talked about, you see the crane or the way house that it was, and the plan was that the 6 men would come around Clifden in a clockwise past EJ, past the Derry Clare, say that way, and around the corner, and I'm showing that the 6 IRA men as the 6 dots, and the 2 RSE men, Reynolds and Sweeney, in green. There was also 2 black and tans on this expedition as well. The 2 of them seemingly got ahead of the RSE men and went into EJ's for a pint, and they escaped the whole thing. One of the bureau accounts was complaining but there were miserable cowards hiding under the counter. We don't know if that's true or not, but the fact is there were only two men, 2 RSE men, 2 Irishmen in green, and that is we have a dimension from the barracks. That's where they were killed, just outside, close to McDonald's pub, which is the Central now, and Clancy's, which is Guy's bar. So the first 3 were to go down and walk past the 2 RAC men, and in the meantime the other 3 men would come around the corner. So the first 3 would be to the right of the green dots, and the next 3 would be behind them. So they had them boxed in, and they didn't have a chance, unfortunately, for the 2 men involved. So then, in the meantime, the firing was going on over at the courthouse to as I said, to keep the RSE people in the barracks. The Bureau of Military History actually gives the names of all which has been used to Michael and myself, and Myles. So you see PJ McDonald there and Gerald Bartley, John Feehan, Dick Joyce, Michael Joyce and Peter Wallace. They were the men, the 6 men, and the rest of the men, including Burrick and Malia, were over at the barracks, 15 of them. So that was the.
And then at the very bottom is interesting. You also have, these are the support net, the scouts, because of course you had the volunteers, but then you had local supporters, and then you had local scouts as well. So like the volunteers are kept going by a big support network. John Gavin, Mim Keneally, John Burke, James Whelan, that's a brother of Thomas Whelan, and Joseph Corbett from Derry, and that's John Corbett. I remember telling me that that they were involved. Derry is just on the outside of, 2 miles north of Clifden on Streamstown Bay. So this was a very significant group of men.
Yes,
this was a major engagement.
There was a lot of people involved in it. Yes, absolutely, not just the people from Algiers and the Bay, definitely. And this was the toll afterwards. McDonald's hotel burnt down, and his son was shot. He was with the Connacht Rangers, and he was killed for no reason by black and tans, it would appear. Dreadful killing for no reason. Willie Clancy was very badly beaten up. It was just chaos. When the IRA retreated from Clifden after the operation, they were heading back to Ailíocht and there was a special train sent out from Galway. Came out at about 2 in the morning, and while the guys were going back to the safe house, they could see the train coming through, and later on the flames coming from Clifden.
One of the important points, of course, about the raid is that it wasn't in direct response to the execution of Thomas Whelan, and which has often been said.
Yes.
So the raid initially was to be at Darragh. That Darragh, for whatever reason, the auxiliaries didn't arrive. The patrol, as usual, didn't turn up. So they rejigged their attack, because to mobilize the men was very important, to keep them motivated, because if you're hanging around for too long, people get cold and wet and dispersed. So the prospect of an attack was important for it to carry out, even if it didn't end in success. So it seems that it was more a coincidence that they're going into Clifden in the aftermath of the execution. It's not as a direct result of it. It's coincidental that it takes place. So the two things are coming together. But what we can say is that these were mobile, organized, thoughtful, planned men. This wasn't a bunch of amateurs, even though few of them were professional soldiers. This was a thought out project. And of course, the burning of Clifden happened subsequent to this. So that's a background to the assault on Clifden. And it was wonderful just to tease out the links with the Welshes and the Gavins and all the other families are involved in it. And those are the details of the local history, which we hope to and will and have continued in the rest of our talk, as I will take over now from Shane. And in part 2 of our talk, we will follow the column on their subsequent raids and attacks down in Screeb, Battle of Muncherone, and their subsequent flight from a major effort by Crown forces to sweep through the area to capture them. So it's a journey that's continuing for the next several months, and it's an extraordinary story. So Gurmila and I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our 2-part talks. Okay, good evening, everyone. Shane and I are back again for part 2 of our presentation this evening. The second part of our proceedings really is following the column in their journey out of Clifden and into the heart of the Connemara Mountains. And this photograph again illustrates the images we're looking at, the landscapes we're cutting through. The mouth of the Kilry, the bottom left. This is photograph taken from Scalp Porrick-Amalia up in Glanlash in the heart of the Turk Mountains, with the fog coming in off the Corrib here. And this photograph here is of one of the extraordinary events associated with republicanism and the revolutionaries that we're talking about here. And this ship is called the Sayonara. And we have to sort of move back to the beginning of the First World War. Of course, hugely significant global event, many involved, Irish people involved, and of course, and the Irish coming in very much through John Redmond on the side of the British. Home Rule Bill promised, but lots of people unhappy with that. And the O'Malley's, of course, were among them, revolutionaries from early on, from an ancient Gaelic family, and scholars, linguists, and from the upper classes of Gaelic society, really. So and as part of that recognition that these were cultural leaders and military leaders, this ship turns up from America. And this is a report, there's a photograph of it. It's called the Sayonara, and it comes up in December 1914. The First World War has been on now for maybe 4 or 5 months. And a report is forwarded from Queenstown referring to the arrival of this ship off the west coast of Ireland. It's flying the American flag, and immediately it raises suspicions. Officers on guard reported suspicious about the owner, Colonel McBride, an American citizen hailing from Los Angeles, but he talked with a German accent, and he's on a sailing expedition to Ireland in the middle of the war. Nonetheless, On explaining that they were waiting for better weather to leave on their annual winter cruise, the yacht was permitted to depart. Now, the Cynora did not, however, leave Irish waters immediately. And we have various accounts from intelligence reports tracking its play, because at Queenstown, a number of the officers there were highly suspicious of who was on board and what their motivations were. So alarm was raised immediately. And the last correspondent here is saying, suggests reply to Cornwallis, safeguard has been detailed to shadow the yacht Cynora. No further action considered necessary at present. So the British are wary of this ship and they keep a close eye on it, as it now supposedly is sailing out of Irish waters. And this photograph is an important one because this is showing you the communication routes at the time between the British Empire, North America, South America. And of course, the British at this stage had cut and actually stolen some of the German links with North America, some of their cables coming across here into the channel. And so the approaches and the War of the Atlantic, of course, was going to begin in full flight here, the submarine warfare. So the British intelligence operation out of Cove especially were very, very concerned about the possibility of Germans tying up and linking in with Irish forces, creating another front in Ireland. So Blinker Hall was the man behind naval intelligence at the time, and he ends up as a hugely significant figure in the war. And this is the naval base at Cork, down here on the right. So this is the context of this ship turning up. And where does it arrive into? Well, it arrives into, when it leaves, it turns up at the mouth of Killary Harbour. And this is, the top left is the mouth of Killary Harbour, looking across from Clifden, across to Rochereau and Talabon on the north side. And then a closer view down at Little Killary and the narrow neck entrance into here. Now, there's a lot of traditions about submarines turning up in and out. They're mostly shafted, and what they are half-remembered events of this event here, which is the Channel Fleet arriving into the harbour in 1907. This amazing photograph where all these dreadnoughts all lined up well inside the Killary. So Killary, recognised as a strategic, important harbour, had been once considered as a Royal Naval base. And of course, throughout history, it's a borderland between the O'Flahertys to the south in medieval times and the O'Molias of Murrisk and Ummel to the north. So a strategic waterway and a major smuggling route in the 18th century, political, social divide.
And Michael, isn't it true that the mouth of the Killary is not ideal for ships? And that's probably one of the reasons why it wasn't.
Well, it's got a narrow, very narrow and shallow entrance, because there's a lovely dive site here. Scuba Dive West to a lovely dive site, which I've dived on here at Inishbarn Island. This at the bottom left here. So it's 40 meters inside, but it's shallow as you go out. So not the perfect entrance. And of course, it's but easily defended. So it has pluses and minuses, but it's deep water inside here. And there was a plan from Recess, where the railway station is, to build a railway line up to the Killary. But of course, independence got in the way of all that. But the Killary was an important and plays an important role in this story as we go along. Now, as this ship appears off the Mayo Galway coast, there's trouble for this ship because masters come to wed for the Marquis of Sligo. Lord Arthur Brown of Westport House, Connemara, arrived in London, and he demands to see, he's boiling with fury, and he says, with his own eyes he'd seen the Cynora planting mines in Westport Harbour. These fellows may be Yankees, but they're in the pay of the Germans, and I'm not going to sit here and watch them planting mines under my very nose. Now, what's very interesting about this, these are the Unionist community in Ireland. They're the gentry who are violently, in most cases, there are exceptions, Countess Markovich being one of them, Alice Cashel being another one, who are very concerned about the growing revolutionary fervour in the West and generally in Ireland. So they're the strongholds of British establishment power in the West. And he's demanding action. And the action he gets is very interesting. So the Cynora is here. And but we have an account of it, of this vessel. And it is rarely referred to, this incident. And it's because people haven't understood its significance up to now. This is Martin Keneally writing about, one of the volunteers, about it. Now, he gets the date wrong, or it probably is just transcribed wrong. A beautiful white yacht steamed up the Killary, escorted by 6 British destroyers, seemingly under arrest. The narrow entrance to the bay was also guarded by the cruiser. And remember, if you go to the mouth of the Killary, there are at Inishbarn Island and at Dooneen Beacon, there are reflecting towers for the Royal Navy to come in and out. So this was a a known anchorage, if you like. The rumors at the time were she was supposed to have left America on a world cruise before World War I and as started, and I knew nothing about it until was accosted by British warships. Her papers were supposed to be in order. It was rumored that Major John McBride was on board. Of this I cannot be certain, but I do know that someone from the yacht contacted Pádraig Ó Máille and they went on board. The name of the yacht was the Sayonara. It remained in Kerry Harbour for 4 days. The escorting cruiser went to direct to Dardanelles and was sunk there. Now, this account is very interesting because it shows that this date is wrong and this is accurate. So the ships were sunk in the Dardanelles, yes, but that was prior to 1916. So this is a really significant account because we have a slightly different account, but it more or less ties in. This is Evelyn Ban Thomas Ó Máille. So this is the wife of Antullabh Thomas Ó Máille, and she's writing about the events just before the fast day of Christmas in 1914. Farahog Colonel MacRider Féin captain on yacht Sergum Winterone. So the captain of the yacht came to Winterone, and he said he was from America and that they were going to assist him in getting arms ashore if the volunteers would help them. However, Padre Ó Máille was a little bit wary, and he nonetheless went aboard the ship to find out further information. And they weren't really too certain about them and the certainty of who these guys are. So they were a little bit suspicious of them. But the fact that they did go aboard the ship and that this link was made. And these are the two characters here standing on board. This almost caricatures, if you like, here, but these are supposedly Irish Americans, supporters with a German accent. However, the mystery is revealed when Brown of Westport House demands an answer, because he's going to go to Churchill and demand action over this, what he sees as clearly a suspicious enemy vessel. So Blinker Hall, as he was known, told him, rather than a small part of the truth, he told him he was absolutely astonished what the story was. Have no fear of the Sayonara. Her owner is a major in our own army, has won the DSO. The American captain is a naval lieutenant who will serve with me in the Queen Mary. Those on board on the Sayonara were so chivied by the British authorities that the bad boys came to them like flies to treacle pot, and they were able to meet almost everyone who was working against us. So the whole purpose of this yacht, it's a British intelligence operation to sail up the west coast to gather information on who are possible German supporters. And remember, Casement is active in raising funds, and also they're on the lookout for Casement because they know he's arriving. And he does turn up off the Kerry coast, and the whole thing is the Odd is captured and sunk, or it's sunk, it's scuttled, and Casement is arrested. But it was largely due to their efforts that the right up to the rebellion of 1960 were able to keep a watch on the most disloyal elements with comparatively few men. So this is really interesting. The British knew a hell of a lot what was going on, but they didn't act on it. Of course, they had other things on their mind in 1916, the huge, big military campaigns in France. So this mystery of the Sayonara is there. It's a British intelligence-led operation, and they're sussing out along the west coast.
And it must be said, Blinker Hall was the man in the Admiralty in terms of intrigue and anything that was going on. He was involved in it at all times. Yeah, so it's a really interesting link though with that. And this, of course, he writes about this. He devotes a chapter of this in his biography. And of course, the other people that were in meet in this time is shortly before the beginning of the war, Sinead Ó Máille entertained to dinner Sir Roger Casement and Sving Ranger, the editor of the Berlin Tablet. She called on that occasion, prophesied complete freedom for Ireland if Germany won the war, provided she lent her support. And she believed that this influenced Casement in his subsequent actions. Of course, and this is the sort of naivety, if you're right, of some of the nationalist forces, is that you know, they were allying themselves now to a powerful empire, were just slaughtered their way through to Belgium. And of course, weapons that it was using Connemara subsequently were imported into Howth. So some of the weapons that the O'Malley's and their column and
are actually imported through German contacts.
And of course, Casement got very disillusioned when he was in Germany, and he came back, as we know, but he'd been there a long time, and very little was really happening in terms of what he had been hoping for.
Yeah, and he wasn't getting much buy-in from Irish troops that were captured either.
No.
You know what I mean? So the Irish were fighting with Redmond's army with enthusiasm, it must be said. And the Connacht Rangers, of course, was the big regiment from this area. And so large numbers of Irish. So the Republican cause was not by any means the majority cause early on in the war anyway. Now these are just, Shane went through these earlier again, just the column members who led the attack, and Clifden, and these are the actually attacks that took place and the dates that took place in. So Clifden, and the reason why they attacked, the column is quite late getting off the ground. Pressure is coming on. Remember, Pádraig Ó Máille is an elected TD. He's a senior figure of the new revolutionary movement, and other rebel groups are operational, and they need to take the pressure off. It's spring of 1921. There's major British operations going on. The decision is taken, probably a wrong decision, to move back, close the smaller barracks. That opens up a lot of ground, but these smaller units that are established are there literally to draw in troops. They don't have to be spectacularly successful in any one individual engagement. The whole purpose is you're spreading the pressure and you're relieving pressure elsewhere. So Clifden March 1670, the march, that's followed by the Screeb attack in April, 6th of April. Then later on that month, coming up next week, in fact, Monteroan ambush. That's followed by the 3rd of May, the Turmacady ambush. That's just from the Mayo unit here. And the Carroll Kennedy ambush, which is the most successful of them in terms of men killed. I think there's 7 policemen killed. But so this is the operational area. The Connemara flying column are based by and large south of the Kerry, west of the Carb. But they do interact with the other columns. And of course, they're related to them. And the theatre operations, as you can see from the IRA bases, are the red dots and our others. These are the major ones. And the safer houses are down in Gortmore in the south. They're in Gowlon in the west. They're in Glandavach and Danmurra up in the mountains near Drummond. And they're scattered in Lugnaneach. And there's a whole, as you can see, a network of smaller bases and major. And of course, you have blown bridges here at Connemara and also in further north in Delphi Valley here in Dulac. So as you can see, there's quite an operational area, but it's a heavily mountainous, difficult terrain to negotiate. So they're operational here, very much west of the Carb, south of Leenane, or south of Kerry Harbour. And this is the view. This is a view into the main operation, the Kerry Harbour on the left, looking down the Ina Valley and the mountains of the Marm Turks, and looking further east here. So this is the landscape that this column of men are tracking back and forth, planning, retreating, advancing, hiding, going for cover. And we know a lot about it because Tomás Ó Máille, brother of Pádraig Ó Máille, the O'Máilles from this were a highly scholarly family, privately educated, studied in Germany and Britain, Celtic scholars. Tomás ended up as professor. So this isn't just any old ordinary. These are the old Gaelic world here, leading the actual operations here, together with P.T. MacDonald from Leenane. But these are sort of at the O'Máilles at the sort of heart, intellectual and political heart of the movement. And so this is the Marm Valley. We're looking up into Curt, Glanfada, right up into Glanlash, and the mountain here on the right hand side is actually the mountain above the O'Malley's house.
Peter MacDonald, of course, we've seen him again on the very left hand of the screen in the
photograph here. And the view from the bottom here is a view looking up into Screeb and Gortmore and into Crock'Ourage on the south coast here. So this is the movement. On the Virch is here up in the forests of Connemara. A photograph of Shane here in the middle of the base on the Virch. They're reusing an old herd's house. This is actually another view. This is from the national park. It's just outside the park boundary. So this is looking in. So on the Virch is just in here. I'll just point it out. It's sort of in here, this area here. Stream is running down into Glanmore. And from that base, they're moving. So this is Clifden here, Shanahever, this is Gowlon, and then they're crossing. Not sure exactly which direction. Either this is Craig Hill, they're going either north or probably just east of it, up into the gap here between Thievbawn and Craig, around Lough na Hillian into their camp here. And they stay there the night after the attack in Clifden. This is actually a lovely view down from Gowlon off Clifden, looking down the valley into, this is where they launched their attack on Clifden from. And as Shane outlined before, the earlier, the Gowlon area have been quite significant. So they're tracking east from Clifden following the raid. So they're going from All na Bheach and they're heading in and they're avoiding the roads. They're avoiding the particularly, they're quite busy roads, even the roads weren't great at the time. But, and of course, there's lots of loyalist houses scattered around the place as well. That's another factor you have to take into account. Not everyone was supportive of the revolution, and they're very conscious of that. But they know the mountains well, they have local guides with them. So this is the really gorgeous valley. So this is from All na Bheach is here on your left, or just to the northeast of Lough na Hillian. They then head up into Glanmore, and this is a Mortimer's Herd's house up here. And this is the view across up in towards Mom, the Scalpa, and they're crossing through these boggy valleys here. This is in the national park now, and then they're crossing down into a beautiful place. So they're heading here. This is All na Bheach, into Glanmore, into Glencorbett. This is where my grandmother was born, just here in Connemara, and they have a safe house here in Glencorbett. And this is Stephen Patfesty Joyce. This was one of the houses that they actually stayed in. It's now roofed, and so these are the type of settings. It's in the back of the valley, as you can see. It's remote. There's difficult to get into even today. And so there's a network of families that they're moving in and out of. So this is, again, close, well, within striking distance of the roads, but far enough away to be with scouts posted to stay safe. Having passed through, then they're heading, after the raid, remember they're heading east to their sort of main base, which is in Muncherone. To get there, they're crossing the Ina Valley, and again, they're traveling at night, and they're crossing up to Lugatarif, and they're crossing over here into, right underneath this fort here. There's an old Iron Age fort, and they're crossing down into Glencroft. And this is here, the valley here. It's just west of Leenane, but it's a gorgeous valley, and the families there who still own the valley are the O'Neills. And they're particularly complimented by the O'Malley's on how generous they were with their time, their food, and providing safety and provisions and guidance for them. So the O'Neills are one of the big support families in this area, and they're going back in and out of this valley quite a bit. So that's Glencroft. It's just to the southeast of the main Clifden-Leenane road. So now from here, they're going over the tops of the hills, heading towards Tonally, along the tops of the northern end of the Mamtok Mountains, and they're looking down on the main valley and into Glenlosh, this other valley which plays a lot of roles. And in Glenlosh, they have their house here, again, that's the end of a mountain ridge, and they have Glanlee, or a lovely valley that they own. The O'Malleys actually own it, running back. So they're tucked up against the mountain, and they have a number of escape routes out. So it's a very significant place. It's close enough to Leenane and Mam. It's far enough from Leenane though and Mam, where there's two RIC barracks. So to give them a sort of heads up if anyone's coming. So they were back here now in the Mam Valley, and this is the setting. So this is the house where the O'Malley's are operational out of, and this ridge here is one of their escape routes. They also go back up into the Lee that goes down here. So it's a very pivotal location, and it becomes more important later on when it's attacked. So following their regrouping in Muncherone, they then decide to launch another attack. So the column of men move south, crossing a beautiful pass called Mom Gauna. It's the pass here bringing them over into Glenlosh, and they're passing. As it happens, they stop in Momain. One of the things important to remember about these men, these are religious men as well. You know, they are concerned about shooting people, you know, and there is a visit from a priest to discuss it with them. about, the efficacy of them killing men when war hasn't been declared.
Of course, there was a lot of cases where if you, depending on which priest you went to, you'd get absolution or not, it was, there's always, in the Catholic system, there's always an escape route in terms of sins.
And of course, Connemara denounced them in Clifden.
Absolutely.
For the shooting of church-going RSC men, local RSC men here. But anyway, they do their penance as they pass through Tubber, this beautiful pass here, and they stop at the Holy Well as they go through the pass here. So they're going through Moormain, they're going down into Bunnacrook, and they're crossing south. This is a rebel column now heading for an ambush that they're planning, and they're crossing the road at Uridge, and they're stopping either on the way in O'Malley's in Uridge, and they're heading down on the west side of Crook. That's a
different O'Malley now.
It's a different O'Malley.
And there's a Pádraig, I believe.
Well, there's several O'Malley families involved in this, and they're all either related or distant related, but they're linked up. So this is the view we are now. This is, again, a rarely visited part of Connemara, but it's absolutely gorgeous place. So we're looking up here. So this is Moormain here. They're coming down over the edge of Binrower, crossing in here at Shanahila, crossing over up into Uridge, and this is where the Brendan Joyce lives now. That's their lovely holding in here, and they're crossing down. There's an old bridle path coming down on the west side half Uridge, and there's an 18th century road coming on the east side of it. So Uridge Mountain is a sort of pivotal position, but it means you can travel in great secrecy. And this is the actual road they're traveling along here. This is a track of here on the right hand side, and just a rough line, and they're heading further south through probably Crook, Moor. It's a lovely little hill just west of Screeb. So Screeb Lodge is here, Gentry Lodge, fishing lodge, beautiful place. And they're setting up an ambush here on this corner here, and it's called Chach the Prayers. There was a little Protestant chapel built there for the gentry fishermen. And the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, of course, fished here. Lady Dudley is associated with this area. So this is a very interesting history. And of course, Colm O'Geara famously is from this area. And of course, in following the ambush at Screeb at Darbanov, which is just here, there's one policeman who dies. There's another one injured. There's an injured policeman that they could have shot and they didn't, because he's a family. So these men aren't used to shooting people. You can see in their actions that they're not hardened troops, unlike some of the troops they're actually up against later. But they retreat from here. Colm O'Geara writes in Misha that there was 5 of them killed and that they came on motorbikes. So his account really is fairly fantastic, and it's not accurate because he wasn't there himself. He was ill actually on the morning. So, but it is an engagement, and then in the retreat back, we probably up through Uridge, because of course the main road you can get traffic on it. So
wide open. Yeah.
It's wide open. So the likelihood following the ambush at Screeb on the 3rd of April, which again is partially successful. And one of the accounts, of course, is complaining that I think it's Pádraig O'Malley, that he fires 9 shots and he doesn't manage to hit anyone. And this is a direct complaint, but written later about it, and you get a sense of civil war politics going on.
And of course, there was an RIC barracks at Screeb as well. In this area here.
Yeah. So, but the account of it is, of course, it was very unfair, because the fact that they shoot anyone at all is amazing, because in guerrilla warfare you can launch thousands of shots without hitting anyone. And the idea of having covering fire is to suppress the enemy, not necessarily to hit them. If you hit them, it's a bonus.
Yes.
And the chance of hitting them without snipers are very low, in fact. And
in fact, ammunition was always, as it would appear, at this point, in short supply.
In short supply, yeah. So this is the thing, when people look at it, how come they didn't kill more people? Well, in most instances, very few people are getting, relative to the amount of shots fired. Yeah. So that's the sort of a critique that's made of the attack, that how come they didn't kill more? Well, it's hard. Yes. You're dealing with guys who are also armed,
and as you said, they weren't trained killers. These men.
And they don't have a lot of experience, So, but this is a Screeb ambush. Now they're retreating back up through this country again, and imagine this is a column of men, so they're traveling at night through rough terrain, and they're retreating their route back up. And of course, one of the areas near to them is the Man Barracks. And as you can see, this is one of the barracks that wasn't closed. It's in a strategic position in the Man Valley. Traffic can come along the shore, north shore of the Carib from Connemara. It's controlling access north to Leenane, but it's heavily fortified.
Yeah, yes, the Man Barracks actually had steel plates over all the windows, downstairs windows, I presume. So it's the photograph we show here doesn't show it in its War of Independence stage, but it was heavily barricaded and deemed to be impossible to take.
Yeah, and it's on a ridge as well with
Yes.
a big view, so you're not going to get a sneak attack up on the two-handed here.
No.
So it's in a command, but then it's not too far from their base. So they do consider it, but they don't have the munitions, if you like, to go after it. Or they now what happens later on? So they're back in their base up here. Now the interesting thing, in 1918 there is a raid on the O'Malley's. And there was again, it's a nearly raid by the police. They attack it and they shoot it up, but the O'Malley's managed to mistake. And it's the echoes of the bullets around the mountains that convince the attacking forces that there's more of them. And Tomás O'Malley says that the opening action of the War of Independence actually is the first 1918 attack in an attempt to grab Pádraig O'Malley. So that's a detail I'm not sure, but it's
an interesting
claim.
Piece of information.
So anyway, but a larger attack is planned because everyone is conscious. The O'Malleys are the people you need to catch in order to try and suppress this unit here. So the attack is launched, and this is the attack that goes on the 23rd of April. And so you have column men coming up. They're RIC. They're supported also later with a military, more substantial military, British military forces are coming up. And so the O'Malley house is here in red. In the raid, there's about 25 men in the house. Some are asleep, but they have posted guards out, and they're early in the morning. It's 4 or 5 in the morning, just at daybreak. The raid is not successful. One policeman seems to have tripped and fired his gun, alerting them inside. And instead of a sneak attack, now there's a counter-attack raged against them as bullets start flying, and there is the attacking force have to retreat. They're caught in the open. They rush into the stream that's underneath them, and they're sort of pinned down. And so for the next literally 10, 12 hours, there's a running gun battle going on throughout this area. And of course, it's not suiting either one. The O'Malleys are on the higher ground, and their men, and they sent a unit around to outflank them to the northwest. They sent in some more men to try and outflank them to the south, but again, they don't have a lot of weaponry, and they certainly don't have a lot of bullets,
and they don't have any local knowledge, which must have been huge.
Yeah, but the incoming attack falters. One of the men is shot and killed, one of the police, and as he's dying, a police word gets to Leenane, and in the middle of the battle, the priest arrives, and he's almost killed because they're not quite sure who he is. The other thing that happens in the battle is that one of the police makes a dash for it, manages to hop on to a truck, and is shot but not killed, and he escapes out and is able to raise the alarm further down. So, and later on in the battle, as reinforcements are brought in, heavy machinery is brought in, Lewis guns, the battle proper gets underway. Now, in the middle of all this, they still have time to go for tea. So, but they
well, you have to have your tea, you know.
So there's a great account of them going down to the Kynes, give them tea, and to renew the battle, because it's in a sort of standoff position. If you can see on the left here, the type of terrain, the O'Malley's are higher up with their units, and there's no one making very much progress, and there's bullets flying, and the flying column is well dug in. They're in sheltered positions. They know the terrain well, and there's bullets flying around, but none of them are being hit. So there's one policeman killed, there's another at least injured, and what happens in one account, the O'Malley's, Tomás O'Malley account describes a group of Tans come up the valley, small group dressed as civilians, and they take hostages on the way up from a local, I think it's a Burkman and his wife are coming through, and they are about to shoot them, and they stop and they have a closer look because they're terrified. They don't want to be killing their immediate neighbors, so they realize they don't shoot them, and so there's various ruses devised. In the end, under heavy fire from Lewis guns from these two positions here, the O'Malley's and their unit, the flying column, are forced to retreat, and they retreat up onto the mountain Tonally at the back, and into the valley here. So they're scattering, but they're retreating. They're not retreating in flight, full flight. They're under cover of heavy rain and squally conditions. They're moving back, and as they move back, the house and Pádraig Ó Máille himself and Tomás are among the last to move out, and the others are moving out and they're moving away. And then the British column, attacks the house and burns it to the ground, shoots a few of the animals around it. And of course, they are leaving behind the O'Malley women and their children, and a few other women who ended
up in the shed.
And ended up in the shed. And I'm sure they're roughed up a bit, but they're left unharmed. So the house is burned to the ground, and they retreat up onto the hills. So what's interesting about it later on, there's a complaint that one of the great injustices of all time was that the O'Malleys got compensation for the burning down of their house in the middle of all of this battle. And of all the great misdeeds done out to the British Empire, the compensating for the O'Malleys was one of the greatest of them. So this is the actual, so the valley here, this is a fort on the way up into the O'Malleys. It's actually mentioned in one of the accounts as one of the points that they pass. So this is in the middle of the photograph now is the attack. What happens to the column then is that, of course, there's a sweep organized to try and locate them. Some scatter north across the valley to Joyce's Monterowan safe house. Others go back over the hill into Glenlosh, up into a mountain haven they have up here. And others go into Gowlan, this village over here. It's just on the way to Shannafarrachan. But they regroup again, and in anticipation of a big sweep, they move north over the mountains, and they cross down to the Killary at the narrow neck of the Killary. This is a place called Connemara, overlooking Glannagimla. And the people of Glannagimla, they're avoiding, of course, going through Leenane, which has crown forces in it. So they have to, and these are the mountains they're crossing down. Remember, they're traveling at night. This is not easy to travel. So they're coming over this ridge here, above Leenane, along the top of the hill, and they're being supported in this case by the villagers from Glannagimla and Letteras. So these two villages here are now providing the logistical support from them to make their way northwards across into Bengurram on the Mayo side of the border. And the Wallace family here are particularly important. And of course, there's other families, but the Wallaces are here. So this is Letteras here, and this is Glannagimla.
They probably had to avoid the bridge at Erf as well.
And yeah, oh yeah, because of course, again, you have a Unionist house there, you know, and you have, so they're conscious of who their friends are and who the potential threats are. But this is actually the spot they're crossing here. So this is Peter Wallace. We met him on our journeys. Wonderful man. He showed us a plate that Bartley had given him, Gerald Bartley, and very proud of his family. And these house was subsequently ransacked, of course, in a Black and Tan raid. And they retreat from here up into a higher valley here. So they come up and establish a new temporary base in the mountains and a subsidiary one up in this sod fence up here, which Peter was able to tell us about. And they also hid some of their guns in caves along the base of the Killary here. So Peter here is, you know, it was lovely to meet him and other families involved in this story. For the first time, I think any historian has ever spoken to them.
And they're very rightfully, very proud of what their families have done.
So down here is where we are here. This is the neck of the Killary. Bengurram is up here. They have a smaller little lookout that they established, which gives them a view down along to the Erf and along the Killary Harbour, and also critically down the Man Valley. And their higher base then is substantially further north. And it's a place called Lugacurry. Now, my daughter and I were up in these mountains a good few years ago, and from Peter, via Brian Gibbons, a farmer who owns this valley, he said that one of the upper hut was located at the bottom of the scree slope in overlooking the lake. So this is a very dramatic location. Now, as well as sweeps going on, of course, on the ground with military presence, there's a naval presence immediately offshore, and there's an RAF presence in the area as well. And they mention this on several accounts. And because you have an RAF base in Roscommon, not in Castlebar, which is active, and one of the pilots actually is described. We have him. He's parts of his plane is left in Cashel House still.
That's correct.
And he's dropping what equivalent of small bombs to intimidate the Mayo flying column. It's really a gesture, but he ends up crashing and marrying locally at Connemara. But he was a big fan of Connemara. But they're being scouted by aircraft flying from either Galway or probably Castlebar. But this is the Logo Curry, and they describe scrambling to having seen south of them over the Bains aircraft looking for whichever column is, because there's two columns operation in this area. There's a flying column in South Mayo.
I think anybody who's ever gone through Cashel should go in and have a look at the part of the nose of his plane that's left there. Bill Urquhart Dykes was his name. He's a very affable man.
Well, what was his name again? So
Bill Urquhart Dykes. He became a patent agent, a very successful man later on in life. But he seemed to have a great sense of humor. Anyway, he could see the funny side of it. He's crash land. He's Bristol fighter near his girlfriend's house in Tourmakeely.
Tourmakeely. All right. Well, what's lovely about him also, but he describes that having to get the engine fixed in the aircraft in the RAF base in Castlebar, the mechanic is a known Republican sympathy, so you have these loyalties. People are meeting people they're unsure of. But anyway, he writes an account of what is a raid from the air in South Mayo. But this is actually, so when you're above Kilray, Ben Gorham is one of the biggest mountains there, huge cliffs on it, and the base that is established here is up in this higher valley here. So this is a trek and a half up. And this is the little Logo Curry in here. And this circuit of mountains, really steep mountains all around. And I know you can't pick out, but I had photographed being interested in Broca. Broca are herds' huts. And there's lots of them in the mountains of Connemara and Mayo. And thinking it was a herd's hut. But in fact, we're fairly certain now that this is the actual the hut. That now I have to confirm this with Brian Gibbons from Glandavock, the next valley over, that this is but this actually is reminiscent of one of their other camps. So this is one of the camps that they establish high up in the mountains, and they spend some time here. And if you look at it from where this is above it's underneath this boulder, so it's screened from behind. You have a great panorama down there, and then they have a lower lookout point further down the valley. We're looking across here to the Mamtrasna Mountains. So this is remote country, hard to travel through, but impossible to get anyone. And of course, the planes, even if you did spot them,
you'd hear them in time. Yeah.
But they didn't have any radios on the plane. So by the time the plane landed, got a patrol out, the boys would have been gone anyway.
Oh yeah.
And having flown over this area myself, you can see that picking out one or two individuals would be virtually impossible. If there was a column of men on a ridge line, you'd pick them out handy enough. But you're not going to pick one or two out if they're ducking and diving. But anyway, this is the setting for Logo Curry. One of the lovely accounts we have of it is they're hungry a lot of the time. They're cold. It's snowing up here. It's freezing and cold. So the conditions in these mountains are quite severe. But they go down to a family down at the bottom of the valley here, and they get a net and they go fishing, and they get two salmon. One is 28 pounds, the other is 30 pounds, and they leave the bigger one to the woman of the house who actually cooks for the column. And that was probably the finest meal they had was fresh salmon, courtesy of Lord Sligo. But from here, of course, they are conscious of a raid, because in the middle of all of this, there's a great raid. The Carroll Kennedy ambush has happened, and that's the most successful. I think there's 7 RSC men and 5 or 6 injured in that battle. And so there's a huge racket going on, and they're moving again. So they're anticipating, and of course they are communicating through scouts with what's happening. They have informers working for them in Leenan. So they decide to move again. So they're moving over this ridge down into Glandavock, down into Glanmurra here, where they have again a network of support families, Coins and Gibbonses that supporting them down in here. So this is the mountains just near Drummond, west of Drummond, and north of the Kilray. So they stay a while in these mountains. So this is up here, and this is in the Sheafrey Mountains here. So this is the Gibbons holding down here, and this is one. They've crossed this ridge now they're crossing down into here, and Glanmurra Valley is running this way. This is Glandavach. So this is a view. They continue. They're scared of staying low down, so they come up onto the ridge, and they go up over 2,000 feet. And we know they go up over 2,000 feet because they tell us they're going up, but they also describe hiding in the eroding peat hags up here, and it's freezing cold. And they travel north. So this is near where we were, Shane, there a few weeks ago.
Yes, yeah.
We were just off to the left here. These are shots I had from earlier. And they're going up onto this ridge, and because there is an account that they stop, and in sight of Crowpatrick, they say the Rosary. So, led by Pádraig O'Malley. So, they're not forgetting their obligations.
I didn't realize he was quite as devout as that. But
Yeah.
It's good to hear about.
Well, I suppose you get more devout if you're threatened with bullets and being shot.
It was gun, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you're cold and you're miserable and it's hard. And just to keep your focus,
yes.
Having a belief in another more powerful being is helpful in those situations.
The abject cold must have been extraordinary.
Yeah, and they don't have the gear that we have today, So so this is a view from there looking across onto Crowpatrick, but it is an account of them getting together. And of course, it's a way of binding them back in together. If guys are if they're getting dispirited. Now, they're worried about a sweep, so they head west again and they cross the Delphi Valley, and they're crossing into the mountain. The valley is just south of or east of Muirray, the biggest mountain in Connacht. And they spend a while there. And again, they're now heading, the decision is made, or hearing of a sweep through South Mayo, and they have to cross. So they're crossing at Bundurrica, and they're assisted here by a Burke family who feeds them, and the Nees who escort them across. And we have a couple of accounts of them moving, and they're moving across the Kilray. And this is Kilray Harbour here. So the valley they're in is just up here, having come from these mountains further east. And this is Little Kilray. And down underneath us here is Lugnanach. So they're crossing in 2 boatloads at least, crossing into Dernishlingen Lodge here. And the O'Malley's are heading south and to Muncherone again. And the others are heading west. Some more men are heading west to Lugnanach, to Culfin, while over here there's a raid in Renville that Rena Rowe talks brilliantly about. And so they now have to cross back again temporarily over to Taliban, the Mayo side. Fishermen bring them over, and they come back again before heading south. So this is the whole Kilray Harbour is an important zone in terms of there's a lot of movement of men and troops and naval, and the navy comes in here, and they're described coming within meters of catching them. Yeah. They arrive in Bunown. So this is the area they're going in. And Bundurrica, of course, is this gorgeous little hamlet at the bottom of this valley here, this beautiful valley here. So this is the little harbour as it was around 1900. And there's a little quay, the Congested District Sport quay here, and they're crossing, we think, from here. We're not, it could be a bit further west than this. It may be actually a bit over here. We're not 100% sure. We have some work to do in this area with local people. We haven't managed to meet anyone yet, but we will. And they're crossing over. And again, as they cross, this is what faces them. They have to cross the mountains. Buckhorn is down here. This is Leenan Hill, and Leenan Hill is a steep hill. And others are moving westward into Renvine. So now one of the journeys, so now they've crossed, they're heading back to Muncherone here. And at Muncherone, of course, they've decided to build a subsidiary base. And one of the events described in it is from Glannagimla, one of the men is injured. He's shot in an Keneally man, I think, and he's moved in a sort of 12, 16-hour trek to a safe house in Glenhohan, possibly Leiden's in Glenhohan. Okay. And he's injured when a gun goes off. He's also nearly killed crossing in the mountains when they're crossing north, when he flies down, boulder hits him. So these are the things that I call them. Accidents happen. Many men are injured in just from injuries, accidents. That's a normal part of guerrilla warfare. But the O'Malley column are moving west. So the column is splitting up and they're coming to their subsidiary base, which is up here. And of course, they have a remoter base, which they store weapons in and they retreat into. Because there's now, of course, a big sweep going on. There is ambushes going on. The Carrackenzie ambush is major. It's like a hornet's nest descends on the area. The Tourmakeady ambush has taken place. The Muncherone ambush has killed one man, and they still haven't laid their hands on them. So they retreat into a mountain area here, and the valleys are being swept. And of course, they're very conscious of they are getting local information. That is the Crown forces as to who might be, because the raiding on houses isn't random. When you hear houses being attacked, they know
it's
which house.
It's based on information.
Yeah, so they're getting solid information from somebody. So they're on the move. But this is one of the most extraordinary bases from the War of Independence. And it's a place called Plush Porricamolia. It's up in the Glenlosh Valley. So this is what a column. This is actually from the Leenane Walking Festival. We did this archaeological trip here a number of years ago. And this is about 25 people. So that's what a column of men moving on a mountain would look like, except they'd have heavier gear and they'd have weapons. And this is this gentler ground. But over here, this is when Shane and I led a little expedition up to Porricamolia's cave, and it's tucked in right up high up on the ridge here. Very difficult. This is Shane just at the entrance to a cave that was built by his uncle. And how big was Porrick? You remember what weight he was?
He was 22 stone, seemingly. About 6 foot, I think.
Yeah, so Shane isn't 22 stone yet, but this is some ground. So this is actually the cave. And as you can see, this is a photograph taken from the mouth. You're looking down Glenlosh to Mam. There's a ring fort here. Another royal family once lived in this one 1,000 years earlier. And so you've got this amazing panorama down. And then the interior of it is very fancy. The cave entrance and the natural cave that's been opened and widened and has probably been used for literally millennia. And you have a fireplace inside, a little slit entrance here, very nicely built doorway. Would have had a probably corrugated roof with sods on top of it. And this is a man from Camas, Myles Gibbons, and this is the current owner of Porricamolia's house, Micheál Laffey, who we were up here on the Mount Turks walking. But what's really interesting is this is a substantial building. They brought some stuff up into a chain, didn't they? They had.
They have to, yeah.
And they stored weapons.
And they had a fireplace in it, and it flew up the back, and there was this famous story about a badger getting caught in it. It's actually, if you want to find a really humorous take on the War of Independence, John King, I can't recall the bureau number, but he was hanging around with Porricamolia for a long time, and his accounts of what's going on with himself and the Amolia brothers is absolutely hilarious. It's without a question the funniest bureau document I've ever come across.
You know, they weren't impressed. The Amolias are looking at the trajectory of the bullets, and if you fire them at a certain angle, it might just about hit them.
Well, they were obviously Tomas knew a bit about projectiles, so if you put your rifle at 45 degrees, you get the longest distance, but of course it didn't help you kill an RIC man, unfortunately. But John King thought this was a total waste of time. They were shooting against the RIC, and the two lads were practicing their parabolas.
But anyway, this is their mountain hideout here, and you can see why. And it's difficult to get to. People ask me coordinates for it all the time. I say no, you have to be able to walk, because if you slip here, you're going to fall 600-700 feet, and you're not going to get up after it. So this is really tricky ground, and that's their camp. So when the pressure comes off them, they come back down out of their high den here, And of course, the families in Glenlash are very supportive of the column. And then there's a bit of a lull for a while. Then during that lull, the column splinters up, people go back home, they go out of the area, and the O'Moyles go on a little tour heading east to, again expecting a raid. They head east to Gowlan for a while, they head east over Bunyacunnin, and they go down into Glantray, this beautiful valley here. And in Glantray, they meet up with the McKeonins, the Jenningses, and they're heading, this is a beautiful valley here, and they're heading over towards Finney. And of course, I have to be very careful because of the ambush in Turmacady, there's a lot of action on the roads here. So they go over to have a look at the Finney Church, which of course is designed by, which is the
Eamon
O'Moyle. Yeah. He's in the column, but he's also an engineer. He's designed the church in Finney. And they move back into a little safe house further west, or not a safe house, it's a little bohan. So so this is where I think is, I'm not 100% sure, but it's directly opposite the pub in Shannafarracon over on the side of the hill. And this is a massive boulder. And it's described as being a large boulder with a hut underneath it. And that's what's exactly there. So this is looking up into Gowlan is up here. Corrivach is up here where they get assistance from families here also. But they're tracking along this side of the main road is on the other side of the lake. So this is on the Galway. This is Loch na Foy we're looking down here. And again, they encounter aircraft seeking them out.
This is actually a Bristol fighter, and there's two man. This is what Bill Urquhart Dykes, the same type of plane that he crashed. But you can see that there's a pilot and a gunner, and the gunner is, you can see the gun, the Lewis gun at the back of behind the pilot's position. So they were very effective planes, and as you were saying, they were based in Mayo.
Yeah, and of course they would be do damage to a column of men. You know, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because these are flying quite slowly, relatively slowly.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So this is one of their bases along the shoulder here. So this is, so we're getting towards the end here because we're now out in July. There's talks of ceasefires going on, and there's negotiations being done. And one of the last journeys they make is they're actually up here on the mountains here above Monterone when a man comes down and tells them, it's a dispatch from Dublin to say that, you know, the ceasefire is imminent. It's a day or two from now. And they're wary of him initially. They address him in Irish, and it's clear that he's been sent down from head office to say, listen, calm things down. So, but before that, in anticipation of his work, Eamon decides he wants to go down to save the new church that's been built in Recess. So he takes at 8 o'clock in the evening, they leave Monterone, they hike over Moamgowna Gap, over these ridges, down into Glenlash, Glanfada in this case, back through Momain, and stay with Porrick the Crick, I think they call him. Porrick was a well-known poaching dealer, and he says no. And of course, they do comment that, you know, all the houses here, you would have had poaching as a common house, and of course, a lot of families made a living out of brewing poaching. But he says possibly the only man in Ireland that would know the mountains of Connemara at this stage, as good as Porrick was Porrick O'Moyle himself. From the amount of time, over 2 years now at this stage, traverse in and out of these hills. So they had well used, but they get down here, they stay the night in Darrawella, and they head down then. But of course, they get there before the ceasefire comes officially into place, and they have to hightail it out of it pretty quickly because the tan column comes through. So their retreat back up before coming back down, and then on they visit the church in July, 10th of July. They move back into the hills temporarily because they can still be shot before the truce, and then the truce is announced in the 11th of July. So this is a journey of brave men supported by brave women, supported by a whole network of hill farmers, mostly people not from the gentry class. They're in serious imminent danger. So their bravery is, you know, without a doubt. Their main effort, of course, is, and which is the intention of it, is to draw a support and Wayne. Now, we grew up in a households where the War of Independence really wasn't discussed that much because it was soured by the Civil War politics that came after it. So, so we were just, because of the anniversary that's in it, we've been hoping to look at the actual original battle for the War of Independence, the territory they used, the people they encountered, the archaeology that they left behind, and the stories that are yet to be researched. Because, you know, this is one story, and of course, the documents are interesting is because you have to be careful. The memories are written down 30 years after these events in many cases. But what's fascinating, we have through the Welshes found out, you know, very information from families in the Man Valley. We have references from Peter Wallace. We have more details. And so filling out the very particular detail, and local history, of course, that's what it's based on. And all our histories are eventually based around local history. So I hope you've enjoyed our 2 talks, or one combined with an interruption. So we will continue these studies, and there's lots of information here and lots of valuable material for other research, particularly at the school level and local collections, to follow these extraordinary men who led to our eventually to our independence. So, Gormil Maggie, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.